I still look.
You're listening to the 4-7 Podcast, the podcast where two normal guys interview and reminisce about their favorite Christian artists from the 90s and today.
Welcome to the 4-7 Podcast. I am RJ. This is Mike, as always. I am very excited today. We are welcoming Seth Roberts to the podcast today, who is from Watashi, among many other things that we will get into throughout the night. So, hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited.
So we started this podcast a while ago to talk to some of our favorite Christian rock artists back in the day and today. We've had bands from Tooth and Nail, from Solid State, some of the mainstream ones as well, and then some newer ones as well. It's been really cool to be able to talk and just kind of discover the person. And so again, we're welcoming Seth Roberts today. If you remember Tooth and Nail, if you were a listener of Tooth and Nail back in the day, very influential back in the early 2000s. So and is still doing some really cool music even today. So again, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So kind.
So, hey, I'll get right into it. I actually found you, as always. If you ever listen to any of our podcasts, I always find these bands on the X compilation albums, the Christian Rock X albums. And you were on the first one as a bonus track called Clear. And I heard you on there and I was like, man, this sounds really good. And then I got into All of Me, I think was another one that I loved a ton. But I discovered you on the X album from 2003, along with, I think Toby Mac was on there, Five Iron Frenzy, Switchfoot, Amberlynn, and all that deal. So awesome. It was X that really opened me up to like Tooth and Nail and such. Mike was a longtime listener of Christian rock way before me. When I was just listening to Jars of Clay, he was already into the harder stuff.
Awesome.
But
I brought it back for today. Just kidding.
That's true. Tell us a little bit about kind of where you grew up, and what was childhood like for you? What kind of stuff were you into?
Yeah, I grew up in mostly in San Luis Obispo, California. I was born in Bishop, kind of near Mammoth Mountain. And then when I was really young, we moved to San Luis Obispo. And my parents were amazing. My dad moved there to start a foster care agency with like family therapy. And he kind of pioneered something like innovative in that world. They weren't really doing like therapeutic foster care on the West Coast. So he moved to San Luis Obispo to start agency doing that. And, since then it's been, I guess, 35 years of him doing that. And so he's always kind of been my hero. And my parents were really supportive of me getting into music, early on. Of course, like I kind of followed after my dad and my grandma. They played music, and my grandma lived locally too. She lived like pretty close to San Luis Obispo, Morro Bay. So she taught me piano growing up, and yeah, we kind of we were only really listening to Christian music. And
who are you listening to for Christian music back then?
Well, at first, I didn't really know much. When I was like younger, I was kind of like, I think my first in like third grade. My first was like DC Talk and, you know,
Amen to that.
Jars of Clay, all that stuff.
Hey, RJ, I'm telling you, RJ, you guys are like a match made in heaven right now.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It was Jars of Clay, and it was post hip hop DC Talk for me. I had to get into that stuff later, but
Yeah.
I was just the rock DC Talk.
Yeah, and then there was like some like you know, I would find some like rap groups, you know, or different like I think there was one called like, now I want to say NFT, but I think that's just because NFTs are so popular. No, D-Boy. I like D-Boy. And then there was like some heavy metal groups that I liked. That's when I discovered Tooth and Nail.
Mm-hmm.
And then my parents, you know, they were on board because it was Christian. So that's what I was just became obsessed with everything Tooth and Nail.
Yeah. So you said you listened to, so you're from California, and one thing I love about the Tooth and Nail, we talked to a lot of Tooth and Nail artists, and there's a guy named Billy Power who was part of the band Blenderhead back in the day.
Yes, he's a good friend, good buddy.
Great guy. His podcast was fantastic. Now, did you ever hear his podcast he had for years?
Yeah, I love Bill.
It was great. And, you know, a lot of the bands on Tooth and Nail, they're all very close. They all kind of grew up in the scene together. And the one thing that I will bring up, I'm going to kind of go forward a little bit. You were on Betty Rocket Records back in the day, in your first couple of records. Now, I like to say Betty Rocket Records. Look, I
say that fast.
Listen, this water is killing me today. Betty Rocket Records was like a very, very small kind of Tooth and Nail kind of band, because Tooth and Nail for years was that punk rock and the hardcore scene. They had like Focal Point, they had Blenderhead, they started Curve, MXPX, and then as Tooth and Nail kind of started going more away from that into the more of like the Furthest Seems Forever and Berlin, you know, Betty Rocket picked up kind of where they left off. They had Sick of It All, Sick of Change. They had You Guys. They had CR33. They had Phoenix 11 or Noggin Toboggan back in the day. How did you go? Like Jeff Newsom actually was I think was the lead singer of now he's a world famous wedding photographer.
I love Jeff. Yeah.
How did you get into the whole scene of like with Betty Rocket Records and everything of that? Take us to that aspect.
I love that. I love that you know all that. And I'm just now seeing some comments too. Someone saying their cousins live.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So Betty Rocket, you know, when we first started Watashi Wa, we were playing a lot of churches, and it was a cool little scene in our area. You know, we would play like San Jose and kind of like up near San Francisco, and we would go down to LA. And it was nice that we were kind of centrally located in California, because we could kind of trade shows with bands in LA and San Francisco, you know?
Yeah.
We got to start playing with all these bands. I mean, we were playing with like Value Pack and
Value Pack. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, we were playing with like Value Pack and Joy Electric and all these bands.
Nice.
And we were like,
you're bringing me back over here, my friend.
Yeah, we were like really young. So then we would Betty Rocket kind of came up, and they were out of kind of Santa Cruz area, which is pretty close to us. And Mike, our guitar player, his brother was in Noggin Toboggan, Jeff Newsom.
Yep.
Yeah, so Mike Newsom was our guitar player. And so when Noggin Toboggan signed with Betty Rocket, you know, it was like, whoa, there's this new label, you know. So we kind of started that, you know, thinking like, okay, let's make a demo tape. Let's do this, you know, let's try to get their attention. So that was our first. We recorded a demo tape, and we played, you know, we kind of played a couple big festival shows in our area, and met, you know, we were playing with a lot of the Betty Rocket bands already. And so it kind of just made sense. We met Betty Rocket, and they, you know, they offered us a deal, and it was cool. Yeah, it was awesome. Very exciting I
That's
think we were
pretty
like,
sweet.
yeah, I think we were like 15 or something.
Oh, wow.
Like imagine you're 15 years old. You're playing with like Nagadabog and Sick of Change. You're playing with Phoenix 11,
Yes,
all these great bands. Like at 15 years old, I'm over here like at my friend's house just doing nothing. You're touring California. That's like amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. And we got to tour. We got to do on my high school summer breaks, my parents let me go on tour. So we got to tour. Like our first tour was with EMH, War Rocket Ajax. We played some shows with Noggin Toboggan, and then we were playing with like the Huntingtons were part of it, and Element 101, and some of the Tooth and Nail band.
Element 101, I haven't heard that name in like 20 years.
Yeah. Sick of Change,
Yes.
all the cool bands back then. So
you're a 15-year-old, 16-year-old playing with all these bands. What was it like being in that atmosphere and being basically doing what you want to do, but being also 15, 16 years old? What was that like for you?
It was crazy. I mean, it was awesome. It was like very much we felt like it was a calling that God called us to, and looking back on it, it's like I didn't really think much about it. I didn't think as much about it as I maybe should have. But we were just so thrilled, and we couldn't drive yet, even for like all those shows. So my dad would take us, we would rent a trailer and he would take us, or our friend Kendall, who was older, would drive us. So, but yeah, it was surreal, really, it was all surreal. We would kind of like, it was almost like we were living these two lives too, because we would go to high school and we would tell all of our friends like, oh, after high school we're gonna go on tour and be musicians, and everyone. I remember my whole high school class like laughed at me. It was just like there's no reference point for them. They're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. You guys remind me of MXPX. And when MXPX was first signed to Tooth and Nail, they were also in high school, just like you guys. And then they would tour in the summertime.
MXPX was like, they were our heroes, and then I ended up playing with them for a little while after Watashi was. So that was pretty surreal too. But yeah, they were the band that really gave us like permission, because it let us know like, hey, this is possible. Like you can be in a band in high school, you can be young, you can do this. And even showing my parents like, hey, listen, like there's this band that I like, they're in high school, they started in high school. So my parents were really supportive, because they could kind of see like, oh, this is, and then obviously once we got the deal with Betty Rocket, my parents are like, oh, this is makes sense. But yeah, it was awesome. Pretty, I mean, I feel like everything that God, like it, when you're really like living in faith or just kind of going after like what your calling is, then it's pretty surreal,
At awesome. 15 years old, because like kind of what you're saying is like, when God calls you to do something, and you do it, he just blesses it. And it's just an amazing thing. At 15 years old, did you feel like God was calling you to music, to be for your music industry or your music band to be a ministry, or where were you at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We were very, like felt very strongly called to like make music to bring salvation, but
that's awesome.
But it was interesting, because like looking back on it, it was almost like we wanted to like pave this way in outside of the Christian market or something.
Yeah.
So it was like always like we were trying to fight against the playing in churches, but really that was so special, like looking back on it, But yeah, we always felt like Watashi wa. I mean, Watashi wa means I am, and which to us, like it was we always had specific like things in mind that we felt like God called us to, with that. And I still feel like that's why I started Watashi wa back again, because I feel like God's called me back to it,
It's awesome
That's
how
awesome.
that's awesome how God calls you to different things at different times of your life. And
Yeah.
I do a Bible study on Sunday nights at my church, and we talk about just staying in the Word, trusting God, because God's going to have your back. He's going to show you where to go at certain times. You literally have to just be like, whatever you want me to do, I'm ready for whatever you want me to do. And at different times in your life, God can call you to different places, and sometimes it might shock you. Has it shocked you that you're going back to Watashi years later?
Yeah, it's interesting because I had so many years where I was just like struggling, trying to understand like what was this and why, and but it's like also amazing because it's like you start to realize things. God starts to reveal things over time, and then it's like, whoa, this is the reason why. So I definitely feel like a new, in the last like 2 years, like a new feeling of like, oh, this is why God's called me back to this. And this is why, I had to kind of take some time away from this. And even with the music that I was making with Eager Seas and Lakes, there's something about that, I kind of needed that season in my life. I know that, and it was very reflective, like personal, reflective music that like, I went through a divorce and went through some stuff that I kind of almost looking back, I think I needed that little time of, processing with that type of music or, I guess that project. But, Watashi always represented, making like very like positive, uplifting music that's like fun and hopefully gets people dancing and is like is inspiring people towards Christ.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So you were signed to Betty Rocket, and then Tooth and Nail came around. I think it was like 02-ish. When you signed to them, what was that? How did that transition come along from Betty Rocket to Tooth and Nail?
Yeah, I think we actually signed. So in Betty Rocket, we signed a little earlier. I think it was like 2000 and 2001.
Yeah, they started around like 99 to 2000.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember now. And then, yeah, we signed with Tooth and Nail, and then we actually made the album a year before it came out, The Love of Life. And that was really that was a really cool experience. For us, Tooth and Nail was always, like I said earlier, like those are the bands that we just listened to so much. We listened to everything that Tooth and Nail put out. It didn't matter what genre. And so that was always kind of like not a dream of ours to be on the label, but it felt really like special to us,
It was actually almost perfect timing when you got signed to Tooth and Nail, because around 2000, 2001, Tooth and Nail was kind of transitioning away from like the indie punk bands like MXP. Well, they still had MXPX, but like Dogwood was on their label for many years. Like Strong Arm, The Blamed, and they started really going more to the indie pop rock stuff. And then you guys were signed right at like that exact time when they were transitioning into what they are kind of going into till today.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting because like we met Amberlynn and May and Under Oath, like all these bands kind of around the same time that we were signing at Cornerstone. And it's cool to look back on because now, obviously you see what's happened. But yeah, it did feel like a perfect timing. And we I think we were so young that by the time we got to Tooth and Nail, I don't think we really realized, like it was almost like we were a little tired from the 2 albums on Betty Rocket and touring, and we were already kind of jaded. Not really, but yeah, we making that first album was amazing. We recorded it up in Vancouver, and we just couldn't believe like the studio and the whole experience was just awesome.
So you had the Love of Life. That was your first Tooth and Nail album, and then a couple years or 3 years later, you had Eager Seas, which I think still came out under the Watashi name.
Yes.
And Love of Life is when I got into you. And again, I just feel like we started this podcast because I feel like that time for me, that was like the golden age of like just Tooth and Nail and Christian music. Like there was 2000s, early 2000s. I got into Emery, I got into Anne Boleyn, I got into you guys. May, we're in talks with having them on the podcast. They were supposed to be on last week.
Oh, awesome.
And so
Tell
they're going to be on soon.
Higher, whoever comes on. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Dave. Yeah, so we're setting a new date. We had to cancel last week, but yeah, it's just so cool to see, and then to see that a lot of these bands, whether they're together or not, are still doing really awesome things, and their music is still being reached. I wanted to share with you. I don't know if this will make you feel old or not, but my 7-year-old was in the car with me just 2 days ago, blasting All of Me. And just awesome. Singing. So you have a whole new generation of people listening to All of Me by Watashi Wa. So
yes, that's awesome.
So you mentioned you got on there. You did an album, The Love of Life. You kind of mentioned it already that you were a little maybe burnt out or just tired. I don't know. But what was that like getting into the Tooth and Nail mix, releasing that album, and then now starting to tour with some of these bands? What were you guys dealing with at that time?
Yeah, we signed, we made the album, and then we spent a long time trying to find tours to try to like support the album. And hindsight 2020, like I was saying earlier, we were kind of trying to not play churches for the last couple of years. Before that, we had only toured church tours, really, and so we were trying to find tours that were like more club tours, and we just couldn't find any. It was like for so long we were just like, why can't we find anything? And so I think looking back on it, we probably should have just toured the church tours, and just put the album out, but we were being stubborn and young, and so we waited, and finally we did put the album out, and we started doing some tours, like just small tours. Nothing really like was sticking, a lot of the other bands were like, I think, even the way, because our album was like a little bit softer than the other stuff, like not the heavy, it wasn't like a heavy as Amberlin, but it wasn't as like, I don't know. So for whatever reason, we were like having a hard time landing something to support the album. So finally we did, I think the first big tour we did was that Tooth and Nail tour, with Me Without You and Amberlin and Emery. And so, after that, we started to kind of gain some momentum and tour with more bands. Our first kind of, big tour outside of that Tooth and Nail tour that I just remembered that was before it was with Copeland.
Oh, wow. Great.
And we both went on our first like US tours together. So neither one of us had a following, much of a following. So, the shows were amazing, but looking back on it, it was just a really fun tour. And we became such good friends with those guys. But yeah, Tooth and Nail tour kind of snowballed into some more. And yeah, it was cool. We were like, at that point we were like just having a great time. Yeah.
It's funny looking back on that time and thinking that you guys were worried that people wouldn't show up to an Anne Boleyn, Me Without You, Watashi Wa Emery concert. And now you guys could do a cruise, and like, it's just like
you kick DC Talk off their cruise. You guys get your own cruise right there. I'll tell you right now.
We should. That's a great idea.
No, but like honestly, like back in the day, I feel like those tours were everywhere. Like there was a bunch of these, and then you look back and you're like, man, I could have seen these bands for like $5.
Yeah.
And now it's like like Emery, they almost never come up this far, to Rhode Island. So when they come around, I'm willing to dish it out. But So, you mentioned Amberlynn, Me Without You, yourselves, Emery, that was your first, I assume, larger scale tour. You did come up near us. You were in Worcester, which was awesome, over at the Palladium at the time. Worcester. So, what was that tour like for you guys? Any good memories from that time?
Yeah, that tour was awesome. I mean, like I said, that it was very life-changing for me. Touring with those bands, becoming friends with those bands. Me Without You, a lot of we became so close with them, and they were so inspirational the way that they saw the world, like their faith and their worldview. It definitely like taught me a lot, just like being around them. Amberlynn, same. Like we became so close. Nate actually played on our last album. Nate Young from Amberlynn played drums on the whole last album that we did, and we're still like so close. Like Steven just sang on the new album, and so that tour was just like it was very special. It was like every day we were all hanging out. Really got along right off the bat. All the bands got off, right off like the first show. We were all kind of like, oh man, let's go hang out. I think we went to the beach after the first show and like went swimming. Awesome. Yeah. So it was rad. It was really good memories. The end of the tour, there was like some pranks though. That went a little south. I think we talked about that on one of the podcasts. But
nice. Very cool. Well, hey, from there, you guys did another album with Tooth and Nail, but around that time frame, Watashi Wa, I think, essentially broke up around that time. And you went into another project, staying with Tooth and Nail. What happened there? What was the transition about there?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Like our guitar player quit. After the Love of Life, our original, or the second guitar player of Watashi Wa, Mike Newsom, he quit after we recorded Love of Life, and so we started playing with our good friend Luke, and we toured with Luke, kind of supporting that album. And then after the Tooth and Nail tour, Luke quit, and so we were kind of like trying to get new guitar players, and it was like things just weren't working out. We were doing different tours with different guitar players, and then I think we were on tour with May, and our guitar player, at that time, our most recent guitar player, actually Andrew from Sick of Change, was playing guitar with us.
Nice.
You guys know Sick of Change?
Yeah.
Talk about that. Yeah. So
yeah.
Which Andrew and I just talked last week. Funny enough, we haven't talked in a while.
That's cool.
But yeah, he needed to quit and go home after our first show on that May tour. So after that, it was just kind of like our last blow. It was like, man, what is going on? Like, we just can't keep this together. And so we went up and recorded an EP with Mike Herrera from MXPX. We had talked about doing like a Watashi Wa Arthur split. Do you guys know the band Arthur? They're like
Arthur was MXPX's side band, right?
Yeah, they had like a side project.
Yeah. Was Mike Herrera's side band specifically?
It was all the guys from MXPX and then Neil, their guitar tech.
Gotcha.
Oh, nice.
So we were gonna do this, a split with them. So we went up there, we recorded, Mike produced it. That was awesome. We're gonna put that out at some point. We still haven't released it.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it's coming. And then and then right after that, things just fizzled right out. So Mike asked me if I wanted to start playing with them, and that's when I started playing with MXPX. and Watashi Wa kind of broke up essentially. And then
I gotta ask you this. Yeah, go for it.
Oh no, you guys.
No, I asked you this question. So it's like you were at this mountain. Like your life started, 15 years old. You're Watashi Wa. You're 15 years old. You're on Buddy Rocket Records. Then you go to the next step, Tooth and Nail Records. Then you go to the next step. You're like playing with one of your idols, MXPX here.
Right. It's insane. Yeah.
Describe that. When you get that call, you're like, "Hey, want to play with us?" You're like, "Excuse me." Say
yeah, again. Totally. No, it's weird. Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like, I'm so thankful, but I also felt like, oh, this was meant to be, on some level, or God's plan,
Oh yeah.
And like I said, it starts to feel, when you're living that way, it starts to feel like, whoa, this is surreal all the time, But yeah, it was so fun to play with them. They're my heroes still. I love those guys still. And I played with them for a little while, and then kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, I want to work on my own music again. And at that point, I thought it was like essentially a new band. And we were called Eager Seas at that point. So we made a record. Mike and the MXPX guys played a lot on the record, because Watashi Wa had kind of essentially broken up. Lane, who played in Watashi Wa drums, he played on that Eager Seas album, and me and Jason, and then the MXPX guys essentially. One of the guys from 90 Pound Wuss played on some of it. We had friends come do stuff on it, sing stuff on it. So that album became much more of like a project album, less like a band. And that was the first album I made like that,
Which album is that one offhand? Is that the Agreement one, or?
So that is what became Watashi Wa Eager Seas.
Oh, so okay, I'm with you.
10 years in separating states and all those. So, and the story is with that, we finished that album, and the album and the label didn't really mesh all the way. So we ended up asking to get out of our deal. Our A&R guy honestly, he didn't really like the album. And so that's why we called it Watashi Wa. That's why we put it out under the name Watashi Wa, to get out of our deal.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm so glad that it's a Watashi Wa album, because it feels like a Watashi Wa album to me.
How does it go? Like you spent hours, maybe months, weeks, months, producing writing an album, recording an album. Your A&R guy gets it. He's like, "That sucks." Like, how does that? Like, what does that do to you? Like, I would have been like, "Well, I don't like you either." So,
I don't know. Me and Chad have a weird way of I don't know. There's something that just doesn't work.
Are you guys still friends today with the A&R guy?
Yeah, I mean, we talked. He had talked to me about playing a festival that he was doing, and just saying how it was going to be a sure shot and everything, and then it didn't work out. So that was the last I talked to him.
All right. So from there, you did things with Eager Seas name. You did some stuff with the Lakes name. You mentioned, just personal life, maybe being a little hectic during that time. What was this time like for you after Watashi Wa? Kind of during this whole period. What was that like for you?
Yeah. So after I left MXPX, put out the Watashi Wa Eager Seas album, we did a tour with our first tour to kind of support that was with Copeland, Love Drug, Acceptance, and us. And nice. And then shortly after that, I got married. My wife at that time, to be completely honest, just didn't want me to tour anymore. Didn't want me to play music anymore. So yeah.
How do
So,
you how does that conversation even like come to an agreement? Because like you have your two loves. You have your first love, music and touring, and then this new love comes in and it's like, it's like it's almost like the jealousy of the ex-girlfriend. No, you can't be over there.
I know.
That's nothing. You can't hang out over there. Like,
Yes.
how do
I
you
know.
pick between that one?
It was hard, and I was so young and naive, you know. So I actually turned down a lot of opportunities at that point. It was even, I started like writing songs for some pretty, you know, major artists, and I was like getting into some pretty cool opportunities. And you know, we did the EP with Militia Group, the Lakes Photographs EP, and we were planning on kind of starting a tour and get that Lakes off the ground. And then that was kind of when the big news dropped that I couldn't really tour, you know. And then I ended up having kids, 2 girls, which I'm
Nice.
so thankful for. And so touring, you know, I would just kind of like got more into recording projects with Lakes. And so we would tour as much as we could, you know, as much as made sense with trying to focus and being present as a father and a husband. And then we you know, I went through the divorce and made a couple albums about that about like, you know, the Agreement album and you know, Fire Ahead were very much you know, about that time in my life. And then got remarried. Fire Ahead is a lot about that too. And kind of like my daughters now, as they're getting older, I've been able to like get more into music again, you know,
Nice.
again. And so the last album we did, Mine as Well, you know, we did some touring on those last couple albums. We toured with like Amberlin on their farewell tour, and you know, kind of got to do some cool things around some of those albums. And yeah, just recently we're about to put out a new album this year, or maybe 2 albums this year, but I think for sure one.
Nice.
And like I said, kind of got back into doing Watashi again. So
Okay, nice. So during that time, you mentioned you got remarried. You have two daughters. What was it like? Your 2 daughters are now older, I assume.
yeah.
What do they think of you, your Watashi your musical career? What is that like for them having you as a father?
Yeah, it'd be cool to ask them. So they're 13 and 15, and so my oldest is a sophomore in high school, and so they're listening to a lot of music that, you know, honestly, that I used to listen to. And it's fun age because they're listening to stuff that we listen to, and that stuff's kind of coming around again.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of cool again. And so even some of the stuff, I think that, you know, I think their friends think I'm cool, you know. But there's definitely like still that thing of like, duh, they call me Papa. They call me Papa. So they're just, you know, they are, you know, embarrassed of me. They think I'm not as cool as they are, but they,
So
yeah,
for
they
me,
think I'm cool.
I have oh man, I gotta count them. I have 4 children, and
Oh, that's awesome.
I am at the point now where I try to get them into the music that I like to listen to, so that I don't have to listen to bad music. But similarly,
Nothing wrong with
they've
Taylor
got me
Swift.
into their music too. Yes, I have to. I listen to Taylor Swift quite often.
Tay
Olivia
Tay's my faith, so
Rodrigo.
that's fine.
You know, some of the stuff they're listening to. Have they brought you into any music that you know, maybe shouldn't say out loud? All right, what are you listening to with your daughters that, you know, is not cool?
No, I mean, I like everything. I like all music. And honestly, I love pop music, and I've introduced, like, I told them about Lizzo. I was like, Lizzo's gonna be huge. You guys don't even know, and they were like, "What? What is this?" I played "Water Me" for them. So I try to like, I'm obsessed with music, so I'm always listening to new music, and but then they introduced a lot of cool bands to me that I've never heard. There's all these cool new bands that sound like bands that I used to listen to, and I'm like, whoa, this band's awesome. And they're kind of into cool music that I think they're a lot of their friends too are kind of into stuff that I used to even listen to and when I was younger, like the Smiths. And so, yeah, it's fun. It's a cool age with music for them, that high school age, but of course we listened to Taylor Swift a ton with them growing up, and all the Katy Perry and all the pop stuff. But I listen to that stuff anyways, so
I'm good with it too. So so Eager Seas, you came out with you said Mine as Well back in 2018. In 2020, as everyone knows, we hit our pandemic across the world. What has the last 2 years been like for you? I guess on one hand musically, and then on the other hand personally, how have the last 2 years been for you?
Man, yeah, really hard. Really rocked my world, and good and bad, But musically, I made a lot of music. I made probably like 4 albums or something, or I'm not done with them yet, but enough to kind of finish up 4 albums. And so that's exciting. And I'm really, for me, it became this time of, my family went through a lot. I'm remarried. We're co-parenting with my ex-wife, and there's a lot of challenges that every family faces with that. You throw in a pandemic, you throw in a high schooler that's starting high school first year online, and then all of these factors of like, me and my ex-wife don't really see eye to eye with faith or
that's going to be a challenge,
or even the pandemic stuff, and so that became a really big challenge, because it's like, it's already a hard time in the world, and then our family is kind of faced with this like turmoil, almost like inner turmoil of like not being aligned on the same page, because everything got heightened. Everything got so fearful with the media, and this like, to pick a side, choose a side, this side or that side, like and
I just picked the right side. That's all I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously that influence, music became kind of my outlet to really express all my ideas honestly, as like a almost 40-year-old with daughters that I'm trying to teach them, like, this is what I believe is right, So the music really became reflective of that. Like, this is my faith. This is like what I believe as an adult father, husband, that's like feeling called by God to make music again. And it feels like it's just coming out of me. Like, I'm waking up every day. I'm recording 3 songs in the morning. Like, oh my gosh, there's all these ideas, So praise God. Like, I'm excited what happened during the pandemic with that. But it was also that challenge of like, I made a lot of music, made a lot of art, at the same time that I'm trying to be wise and be a leader in my family,
going through that divorce and then writing music, how did that impact your faith? Because I find a lot of times when push comes to shove in situations in life, people either go one way or the other. Very rarely do people just kind of stay in the middle. I feel like Satan can really pull someone one way. Like, where did you go? What was your struggles during that time?
Totally. That's a great question. Honestly, going into the pandemic, I was like in a pretty lost, I got to be honest, like a lost place. Like, I was kind of, I felt like God called me back to him,
Amen.
And looking back on it, I see why, I kind of got lost in a way, like going through those things of like a divorce and everything. It's like, it's like everything was kind of like thrown into chaos and trying to just gather myself and understand who I am and all that, So, and then even my faith, like I was raised Christian with a Christian family. I went to Christian school, K through 12. I went through like a Christian preschool. So I definitely went through this, like trying to question is my faith real, and especially after that divorce where it was like, man, it helped me. It really like rocked my world. It like really pushed me into this place of like questioning everything, but it also helped me see so much. And now I think really getting to that point where my daughters, are now older and they're facing these things where it's like, okay, I'm at this point where I need to teach. I really need to figure out, what do I believe about this? And then you start to see like, oh, that is what I believe.
That's awesome.
That's what I'm saying. And then the pandemic just really, that was when it was just like, boom, that really pushed me into a place, like I said, that I feel like God like just woke me up. It was like an awakening for a lot of people. And definitely like for me as like a father, it really it was almost like I felt like he called me to like step up and be a leader in my faith for my daughters. And then in the same way in my art and in my music and in all that, like I felt like just like, now's the time. You got to say something, because what's happening in the media, I do a lot of work for News Corp, the News Corp company. And I just feel like what's happening in the media and the way that artists and musicians are so influenced by what I think is not what I believe. Like, I think it's the biggest time to take like artists to like make art and music and movies or whatever that is like a full expression of like, this is what I believe as like a Christian man of God, in the coolest way possible, obviously, make something. But I think that we're going to see a little bit of a art renaissance, Christian art renaissance, because there's a lot of people like me that feel like, okay, I want to be a little bit more vocal now about what I believe, and there's a lot, there is a lot in the album about the pandemic. And, I tried to kind of take a silly, not a silly, but like a lighthearted, Watashi wa view on it. But it is very much like honest about what I think about the pandemic and just like where we're at right now as a society.
I agree with you. Well, two things I agree with. The first thing I want to say is I agree with you that, well, first I commend you for when you were going through that trial. The Bible says, from James chapter 1, verse 1, through trials, it's the testing of your faith. And a lot of times people say, God bless me. And they always say material things. God bless me with a new phone or whatever, money. But they never say, God bless me with a trial. And those trials, I'm telling you right now, we wouldn't be who we are without trials in our life.
Yeah, and absolutely.
We have an opportunity to look that trial in the face and say, God, I am with you on this one, God. Wherever you take me, I'm going, but I'm going with you and nobody else. And that sounds exactly what you did. And I think that's awesome. And the other part I want to say is, I'm Harry. I believe right now, especially in our Christian faith in this world, we're almost trying, not we are, but people are almost trying to shut us up and not say things. And I feel like, I'm not saying Christians have to get political, but I'm saying that Christians do need to start speaking.
Yeah.
talking about their faith. Like it says in Matthew, it says, "Go to the ends of the earth and make disciples." It doesn't say sit on your butt, but it does say we are to try to make disciples. But we need to talk about our faith, express our faith.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you telling us your story over the last couple of years here. I've dealt with very similar things. I went through a divorce back in 16, 17, and both of us are Christian, and that was just a tough world to navigate. Divorce in the church and the Christianity realm of things. And I have 2 kids from that marriage that are now 9 or 10 and 7, and just having to guide them through that time along with myself. And then on top of that, just like you, having, an ex that I have to work with, and we don't always agree or see things eye to eye. And then the pandemic hitting, just like you said, it's been a very teachable moment for my kids. We've tried to use all of the stuff that happened in the last 2 years, in our world and our country, as teachable moments, for our kids.
Absolutely.
So it's great. I'm glad that you went through that. But you mentioned a couple things about this coming year. You mentioned, I think, working on some stuff with Eager Seas as well as Watashi Wa, or is it all Watashi Wa? What's this year look like for you?
Yeah, just Watashi Wa is my focus right now. Like I said, I always felt like, I felt called to Watashi Wa at a young age, and I feel called to that again. And so we do have an album that is finished that's like coming out for sure this year. Awesome. So that's exciting, and it's got a lot of the guys that we talked about, like Josh from Dogwood is on it, and Matt from Reliant K.
Is he really? Josh from Dogwood's on. What's he doing on it?
Billy from Blenderhead's on it.
Is he really?
Yeah, a bunch of friends. Yes,
nice.
Yeah,
we had Josh from Dogwood on it on this podcast. 3rd or 4th podcast.
Oh, awesome. Yeah,
he's a good dude.
Yeah, he's my homie. I love Josh. Yeah.
So what does Watashi Wa look like now? If you were to do you picture yourself going and playing some shows this year or next year?
Absolutely,
or is this?
Yeah.
Okay. So what does Watashi Wa look like now? Are those guys just guesting on stuff, or do you have a lineup?
We have a band. So Jeremy from Noggin Toboggan is actually in the band. In my band, and then a couple guys that I've been playing with for a while, Teddy and Miles. Miles plays guitar, and Teddy plays drums, and then we're we'll probably tour with different people depending on the tour. But yeah, our plan is to tour full time. When the album comes out, as much as we can. And, my goal is to play music full time again. I really feel like, I feel like it's where I feel called to. It's where I feel like the most myself. And so I really, our goal is to focus fully on Watashi Wa and start kind of like gearing up to do that as much as possible with as touring and everything gets more normal with this COVID stuff. So
now, is your current wife saying that you can tour?
Yeah, totally.
I like her. Keep her. I like her.
Yeah, she's very supportive. She loves my music, and yeah,
give her a high five for me when you see her.
I will.
We do have a question. We do have a question from one of the listeners. Where did you have a bigger following in California? He's asking stuff you've already answered here. Throw a show. Would you throw a show today? Where would you want to play if you could play anywhere out? Where would you want to play?
Well, we're from San Luis Obispo, so we always have a really good time in our hometown, of course. And that's probably like where we've got the biggest following because that's where we're from. But we always love playing in LA and San Francisco. I love San Jose, and Fresno. We always when we were really young, like early years with Watashi Wa, we had a great time playing in San Jose and Fresno. So those places, they always treat us right. And a lot of those bands, you know, like Frito Boat from San Jose, and they became like later on like Fighting Jacks and
I haven't heard that name in a really long time. They released just one album on Tooth and Nail years ago.
Yeah.
It was literally just one album. I remember to this day. Yeah, I have
a lot of those Betty Rocket bands too. They were from up there. So San Jose area, they were good. Logan actually from Frito Boat is on the new album too. He plays saxophone on the new album.
Nice. Well, I'm excited about it. It sounds like a good year coming up.
Yeah, we're gonna announce stuff soon. We don't have everything fully dialed yet, but probably in the next couple of weeks we'll be announcing release dates. So,
are you amazed how your life, how God kind of like stirred, like kind of guided the boat full circle to where it is today?
Yeah, I am amazed. I really am. I'm humbled, and you know, glory to God. All glory to God. I'm so thankful at this point in my life to still be playing music and have the support and people that care to listen. And and I'm excited to see what God has planned. You know, I didn't, you know, looking back on all those years, I never really thought anything of it, like I said, when it was happening. But then you look back and I was like, wow, that's amazing. You know, so
I was just going to ask you this question earlier, but we got ahead of ourselves. But looking back, you were playing at like one, in my opinion, like the best time in Christian music. You had Amberlin with you. You had Further Seems Forever. You had MXPX. You were on when Tooth and Nail just started getting really. You had all these amazing bands that you played with, and now you're friends with. Like, I know, like maybe looking back, you were like, oh, it was just MXPX or it's just Amberlin. But now it's like, whoa, it's Amberlin, it's MXPX we played with and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. It's crazy. Yeah, I love it. Life's surreal.
Oh, yeah.
Well, hey, thank you very much for taking your time to hang with us and, you know, tell us a little bit about your life. What we normally do from here is we'll release this out to Spotify and all the other, you know, listening things probably in about a week or so. We leave it up on our Facebook and YouTube as well, so people can check it out there. So awesome. But yeah, thanks again. And in the future, when you guys actually release the album or stuff like that, you're more than welcome to drop by again and let everybody know about it. So but we appreciate it. And thank you everybody at home, you know, for listening today. This has just been another episode of the 4-7. I am going to drop off in a second here. If you don't mind hanging on, we'll talk after the live is over.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Hey, have a good one.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
You're listening to the 4-7 Podcast, the podcast where two normal guys interview and reminisce about their favorite Christian artists from the 90s and today.